Hi friends, today we're going to be talking about our estimating square roots quiz from last Friday. And Mr. Wood forgot his Apple Pencil at school, so please be forgiving of my horrible penmanship. This might be bad. All right, so let's look at number 1. It says without using a calculator, convert negative 16 over 36 to a decimal. I can't really multiply any whole number by 36 to get to 100. So the easiest thing for me to do is to just do long division. Remember that my denominator of my fraction, or that bottom number, goes on the outside of my long division box every time. I'm going to give myself more room. And then my numerator, the top number of my fraction, goes on the inside. I know 36 cannot go into 16, so I'm going to add a little decimal up there at the top, and I am going to bring down a 0. So now I need to ask myself, how many times can 36 go into 160? I know it can go in 4 times. I know that 4 times 36 is 144. Okay, when I subtract 160 minus 144, I end up getting 16. I know 36 cannot go into 16, so I'm going to add another 0, bring it down. 36 again goes into 164 times. Make that a, oh, that's an awful 4. Oh no, hopefully I'll be able to do this. Okay, there we go. 4 times 36 once again is 144. So the pattern that we're following here, right? Every time I do this, I keep getting 16. So I know that my decimal is going to be repeating with 4s. So for me to write that, all I need to do is write 0.4. And then I'm going to put this, let me make that better. 0.4. And I'm going to put the repeating sign on top, and that's my answer to number 1 on our quiz. Okay? Moving down to number 2, it says without using a calculator, convert 14 over 25 to a percent. Now this isn't too terrible because I know I can multiply 25 by 4 to get 100, okay? Remember that 4 quarters make $1. So I'm going to go ahead and write out my fraction. If I multiply the bottom by 4, I have to multiply the top by 4 as well. 25 times 4 is 100. 14 times 4 is 56. Now, to make this a decimal, I already have it over 100, so all I need to do is just add my percent sign. So this is a percent, is 56%. Looking at number 3, it says, without using a calculator, convert 432 to a fraction. Be sure to simplify completely. Okay, so I know that this 2 right there is in the thousandths place. So I'm going to write 432. That's going to go on the top of my fraction. And the denominator is going to be 1,000 because that 2 is in the thousandths place. Now, I need to find the greatest common factor between 432 and 1,000 so that I can divide to simplify. I know my greatest common factor between the 2 is 8. So if I take 432 and divide it by 8, I end up getting 54. And if I take 1,000 and divide it by 8, I end up getting 125. So my fraction in simplest form is going to be 54 over 125. Let's go ahead and move down to number 4. It says without using a calculator, convert negative 2.07 repeating to a fraction. Be sure to simplify completely. Okay, so I'm going to pretend like the 2 isn't there for right now. So we're not going to pay attention to the 2. We're just going to look at the 0.07 repeating. It is repeating, so I know that I have 2 digits after my decimal, 1, 2. I know that's all, that's because my finger's big. And so I'm going to have 2 nines in my denominator. Anytime that, remember that our decimal is repeating, we have to include those nines. And then it's just going to be a singular 7 because it's 07. So then that 7's in the hundreds place. So it's just 7 over 99. Now I can bring back my -2 and make this a mixed number. So this becomes -2 and 7 over 99. And there's no other way for me to simplify that fraction. Moving down to number 5, it says without using a calculator, convert 64% to a fraction. And once again, simplify completely. Okay, so I know anytime I have a percent and I'm trying to change it to a fraction, I have to put it over 100. So this is going to be 64 over 100. Now, I need to find my greatest common factor between 100 and 64, and I happen to know that it is 4. So I'm going to divide 64 by 4, and when I do that, I end up getting 16. And I'm going to divide 100 by 4, and when I do that, I get 25. So my fraction in simplest form is 16 over 25. Moving down, it says Jackson painted a square living room wall using 63 square feet of paint. Which measurement is the best approximation of the length in feet of one edge of his living room wall? So if his square living room wall is 63 square feet, then I know that a square has sides that are all the same. So in order for me to just find one side of the square, if this is his wall and he used 63 square feet of paint to paint it, I need to take the square root of 63. Now, 63 is not one of our perfect squares, so I need to figure out what 2 perfect squares are between 63. So if I remember correctly, I know that 8 squared is 64, which is higher than 63. And I know that 7 squared is 49, which is lower than 63. Now I need to figure out which one is closer, 49 or 64 to 63. Now obviously 64 is a lot closer to 63 than 49 is. So if I'm estimating this square root, my guess would be, those squiggly wigglies just mean approximately, that my edge of one of his living room walls is going to be about 7.9 feet, or we're rounding up to the nearest integer, so the best guess or the best estimate would be 8 feet for one side of his living room wall. If you look at number 7, it says find the square root of plus or minus square root 25 over 169. I'm just automatically going to put the plus minus sign. The square root of 25 is 5. And, oops, that's a weird looking 5. That's better. And the square root of 169 I know is 13. So my answer is just plus or minus 5 over 13. Looking at number 8, it says estimate the square root of, the square root of negative square root 200 to the nearest integer. So that means we're rounding it up to the nearest whole number, or in this case, integer. So we're not going to have any decimals. And it is negative. So I'm going to bring that negative here to start. I need to find the 2 perfect squares between 220. So as I remember correctly, 15 squared gives me 225, which is just a tad higher than 220. And 14 squared, oops, gives me 196. So I need to find, if I'm estimating this to the nearest integer, I need to decide which one the square root of 220 is closer to. 220 is a lot closer to 225 than it is 196. There we go. So if I had to estimate to the nearest integer which is closer to the square root of negative 220, I would say 15. And again, don't forget that negative, so we're rounding up. So the answer would be negative 15 for number 8. Okay, the last one, number 9, it says estimate the square root of square root of 66 to the nearest 10th. So this time, remember that in the tens place, that's our first place after the decimal. And I need to find my two perfect squares between the square root of 66. So I know that 8 squared is 64. I also know that 9 squared is 81. And the square root of 66 falls in between these. So I'm going to ask myself, what is 66 closer to, 64 or 81? It's clearly closer to 64. So if I were to estimate the square root of 66, I would say it's about 8.1 to the nearest 10th. Okay, that first place after the decimal point.